recorded, and so we have also some explanation on the video. I started recording.
Maybe we can even discuss it further. So the goal is, for sure, the task force goal is to support and initiate the implementation of the project to the vacant spaces. So in addition, the task force will be able to enable the coordination of a series of different stakeholders in Lezha municipality. So it kind of will be the group that will lead this process. So as I mentioned, maybe the task force can be a municipality. So for sure for our own project, we thought that the main the primary task force will be the municipality itself, who will lead this process, and for sure they will initiate the project design and monitor implementation, or monitor other actors who will be involved in the project. So they will play as a monitoring role in this, let's say, project design and implementation. So this is how I understood, and I think can be more appropriate.
Yeah, I guess basically that's pointing in the right direction.
I mean, I don't know if maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe one. So, is it for you? Is there like a task force for the project, or what is the? Did you say the vacant project of the vacant spaces? What do you see as the kind of field of action for this task force? What is the task force doing in your understanding?
So let's say the task force, from my understanding, is let's say one will be responsible for management of these vacant spaces. For the public.
The task force is responsible for all vacant spaces in Lezha.
Yeah, but all vacant spaces in Lezha, but I think that the one who can be responsible can be municipality itself.
So, okay, but let's say we have a task force vacant spaces Lezha, and it's embedded in the municipality, but responsible for all vacant spaces that are there, including the one we selected. Or is it a task force for the 2 spaces we've selected?
I mean, it can be one for all vacant spaces, not only for those selected.
I think it's not so clear what the working field would be, and where the responsibility starts and where the responsibility ends. Of course, we have those 2 cases, and most likely this task force will start with those cases, find out if the scenarios work or not, and maybe it will move on to other cases. I think it's important to understand what the main task of the task force is. So is it really, for instance, do we need to map, do we very soon need to start the dialogue with other vacant spaces too? Or does the municipality have a certain agenda to distribute the public services, so to say, like or improve the financial situation by not having vacancy, having circular economy, or whatever? So, because it could be in the cases which Uli described and also Silvia described last week, it could be that the municipality opens a framework for the spaces only, but there is also another task force which then negotiates with the users and the owners users for the space. So there might be different tasks, and this is, I think, not so clear. Do we just start with those 2 and this is the task for the moment, or is the task broader? Is the task many tasks, like also activating, having the dialogue with the users, with the owners? or just opening a framework like saying we have so much financing or so much support or people who can meet. So this is, I think, not so clear. Did I understand right?
Yes, I think it's maybe for Mavis. I think maybe it's also an issue of sharing visions that I think we are coming from experiences like the one of Creative Räume, or what sometimes is being done and it's considered best practice here in Austria, but we really have in more or less in the structure of the municipality, you embed an agency that is in charge of the issue of vacant spaces for the town or for the city. So it's not about one specific case, but it's about in general to have like a kind of office for vacant spaces in the municipality.
Yes.
And that's I think how we intuitively thought the task force for me and for Uli was this kind of superstructure in a way that is then in charge for all vacant spaces.
Yeah, I was also like when I first read it, I was not so sure how you mean it. Like I actually got it kind of that way, but maybe you thought in another direction. Like definitely the task force should not only be concerned with like those two spaces and like single projects, but to provide a framework for the city as a whole to enable those kind of projects in other spaces as well.
At least that's one way to see it. Maybe it's too fast track for Lezha. Maybe it's better to think smaller and to say let's concentrate on task force for one of the two projects.
I think it should go hand in hand actually, to have the goal to do like to have this kind of task force that moves towards this kind of agency in some way. But like in the beginning, of course, they're gonna play a big part in activating the first.
So I'm more like but this maybe you can tell us or think about it. If for you in the roadmap, it's more like a step-by-step plan where you say, okay, you start small, and then you can develop this task force to something that it's more for the whole city. Or if you think the city can be ready, can be confronted already from the start with the option of having a task force for all spaces. This is something that is a very local issue.
Yeah, so the issue is that in Lezha municipality, they are not, let's say, they're lacking human resources. I mean, to have it for this particular topic, for vacant spaces. So taking consideration that, I think that would be better that we go step by step. So we can propose to urban planning department. So I don't know, one or two persons or experts in the urban planning department, they can take care for this vacant spaces kind of task force. Mm-hmm. And after, step by step, they can go to establish their own task force department only for vacant spaces. But at this stage, I propose to just have it just within urban planning department, this task force. I don't know if I understood correctly.
It's a task force, but maybe it's the main focus of the task force would be to start one project. So not to, for example, not to look at all vacant spaces in Lezha, but to say, no, but the main aim is to focus on one project and implement this project to get started.
Yes, yeah.
Yep. But maybe we move on to show what we kind of got to in the short time. So we kind of stuck to the questions, I guess, a little bit more. And first, like the question was like what are the goals? What do we want to get to with that task force at all? So yeah, definitely the main the main starting point is to really setting up a team that takes care or has responsibility for the subject in Lezha. And when setting up the team, definitely it's important to include relevant stakeholders in the city of Lezha into the team. So I don't think it should be that way, that it's just city administration officials who do it, but that it's more like a broader coalition.
I think also in general, it's a matter of having creative approaches and being also not very bureaucratic. So you need the city on board, but it's difficult to think that it's something that it's only city. Yeah,
I don't think so either. Then, of course, a more long-term goal is to create awareness about vacant spaces and possible approaches to activation. So it seems like probably in Lezha, you're really at the beginning of this process, that actors to whom it might be relevant, the whole idea, really understand what it's about. So you probably or definitely have some educational purpose of the task force as well. And to make that happen, we're pretty sure that you need to make it visible, the kind of idea of activating vacant spaces. And then also, of course, the task force will have one main idea of it is to provide support to owners and potential initiators of this kind of projects. And overall, a very important one will be networking, like the whole, concerning the subject, what kind of stakeholders that might be interesting or should be involved. So you have to network between those. Yeah. And
maybe the experience we have seen and we have tried to present, I think, two basic models, something like the city of Vienna, which is of course big, but as in a way outsourced to creative Räume, this kind of networking and PR tasks, if you want.
Yeah.
And then there are smaller cities that have sometimes created a vacant spaces manager position. So they have one person who is in charge of this, and then who is a person that, in a way, acts as a pivot between owners, initiators, funding, and this kind of things. So these are two models which are available as reference for the city, and we will mention this in the roadmap, but that's important. So it's not like a department, but it's a person sometimes. If you don't have you also have this possibility. One specific person who has this task. Okay.
So, but still, you should have or try to include several actors to really start the whole thing. And of course, we're maybe already now part of the initiation process. And definitely we think of ADMI and Go to Albania as two actors who might play a role in this initial phase of the task force. Then, of course, the city administration has to be included, and Wonderland and Creative Räume, definitely we can provide some information and help along the way to get there. And then once the task force is set up, the core is set up, we start the core that starts the process. You should try to build a broad coalition in the city concerned with it. And that could or should include owners, urban planners, sociologists, also the local industry, local business, cultural initiatives, social services, schools, for example, academic institutions, which there's university in Lezha, but maybe one that is close by. Then of course local residents, local communities, for example, around those first sites you're interested in activating, NGOs, and all these kind of actors should be in some way involved in the process. And how do you do it? Actually, since the state of knowledge about the subject doesn't seem to be so big in Lezha so far. We're pretty sure that like in the beginning you need to have like some kind of short explanation on like a 1 or 2 pager in a leaflet form, or maybe it's even better to do a website where you kind of present what is the idea of the whole thing, where do we going to get to. Maybe on a website would be possible to have some best practice examples, how this kind of projects can look like. So it's important to spread some information and spark some, that people start to develop ideas, or maybe even utopian ideas, or whatever, how it could look like. And yeah, that's definitely a way to try to involve actors, to show them the possibilities that exist. And then when you have like this kind of information campaign set up, then you need to have some kind of kickoff roundtable where like people really come together, and it's always important, like what we miss now basically, to really meet. That's the real start of the process, I guess. Before that, you need to, like, all the other stuff is preparation, and then with the kickoff roundtable, you really get into the real process. And then once the task force is operational, basically, there are several tasks and responsibilities that the task force should provide, and or should, like the field of action it's working in, should first like to establish a contact information point. So anyone who's interested in the subject of vacancy or vacancy activation in Lezha should be able to contact this task force, I guess by email and phone and so on. And that's like a basic thing. Then one activity should be to collect information and research about possible sites in the city. For sure, it doesn't have to be like 100% of the vacancies in Lezha, but at least like to start to list relevant vacant spaces that might be activated, try to find out something about the owners, and to get as much detailed information as possible about those objects, those vacancies, as far as what are the intentions of the owners, or I don't know, like all the relevant information, the size of the place, and so on, and then to evaluate what might be potentials for the activation. And then also to provide, like based on this, basically, when there are potential project makers who have ideas, we will get in contact with, like starting with the kickoff roundtable, but during the networking, any kind of potential project makers you got in contact with, you should of course provide the information about possible locations you feel like that would make sense for their project idea. And when you're getting closer to maybe realizing some kind of project, bringing together owners and project makers, it's going to definitely be important to provide some legal expertise, how like the contracts could be structured, this kind of stuff. And for that, you could, for example, provide some contract templates. And I guess so. That's probably something that could come from the city administration, this kind of legal expertise. Maybe you need some outside information too. I'm not 100% sure how this kind of stuff works in Albania. And then another important idea is when the task force is set up, to what would definitely make sense is to make calls for ideas, so that you have some kind of public campaign to ask for ideas of citizens and interest groups to come with ideas for vacant spaces. You could like either have maybe a couple of vacant spaces you have established a contact with already with the owners, that okay, this vacant space is available, that's all the information we have about it, what are your ideas, but it could also be more general. Doesn't have to be connected to a concrete space, but could make sense definitely. And then once those ideas are coming in, and you kind of evaluate which ones you see as having a quite big potential or to be realistic, you should definitely give some support as far as business side to it, to make them feasible. And to me, since you're like part of your group is the Go to Albania agency that seems to have some business expertise anyways, I think as far as that, we should actually already have the expertise to kind of evaluate this kind of projects.
Okay, so maybe for resources, we think, of course, it would be good to have external funding for the municipality. So it should be possible to find EU funding, and for this, maybe you have already contacts. So there needs to be a screening of a possibility. Municipal funding, but also volunteers. It's a possibility that should be taken into account. But this will happen if also this bottom-up resources are taken, catered for in the project and in the vision. And for the steps, we think the roadmap should be made in such a way that it can provide the municipality with information and with visions that they can use, with ready-to-use visions in a way. You need to screen the EU funding possibilities. You talked about donors, so I think that's a point. The funding should be, I think there must be experience in Lezha, and maybe also above that, how to activate funding. We think EU is one way. And then you need to put together this alliance of stakeholders and that are willing to create, to apply for the funding. This is how we see it, and at the same time, I think in the stakeholders group, maybe it's also a question if you see yourself into it or not, and how, because, or if you think it's more about giving this idea to the municipality and the municipality can take it from there. I'm not sure. So this, I think, needs to be a bit clarified maybe in the next steps when we are kind of working on the results of what we discussed today. But what are the next steps also concerning the task force definitely is a very also personal issue for all of us in a way.
Thank you.
Okay. So is there like anything that's unsure for you or you disagree with as far as?
No, I totally agree with what you mentioned, and so I find it quite appropriate about the composition of the task force and what should be the responsibilities of the task force. As we know, as I know that this is quite new concept in our context, and for sure it's Lezha, which is a small municipality. So maybe it can be a challenge for, let's say, in case, okay, when you say that the task force can be from the ATME or BACID team or I don't know, some other groups, okay, I agree, but in the long term, who is going to be the task force? So, okay, in a short term or medium term, ATME or other NGOs can play a very important role as a task force. Yeah. But when you talk about long term, who is going to about sustainability of the action?
Yeah, like I think when you apply for some EU funding, that is actually probably what the project should be about.
Kickstarting,
yeah. Yeah, like that's the idea of the EU project. We should look for funding, the goal of the project is to find some long-term solution, some kind of agency that works on the subject. But that's like, you need this task force to start it, and then you need either maybe some agency who does it, or as Silvia mentioned, it's also possible in the end that there's maybe one person that does it. But you can't like implement that from the very beginning. First, you need to work on integrating.
Yeah, but I think it's good. So the point is good. So short, if we look about the roadmap, it is short term the task force to kickstart the project. Long term, the municipality takes over the responsibilities and does it. So it's a kind of learning process, blah blah blah, that you do. So yes, of course. So let's build in the roadmap short term, long term.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay.
And maybe what we last time, and I think Francesco has it. We had you mentioned this triangle, no? That when we talked about bottom linked, which I think would be an important concept also for to keep into this roadmap, no? So that the aim is to create bottom linked initiative, so to work in bottom linked. So it's like you mentioned this triangle, and we tried to put it down, but it's part of this task force. No? So it's like you have the city with a task force, which is one. Then you have the owners, and then you have the project makers, and you should. The aim is to create a bottom linked way of activating these projects, no? So the roadmap is about bottom linked actions.
Yeah, but just one, Silvia, one question. When you say task force, municipality, it's part of the task force, right?
I think it's more like there is a little arrows of the city, the municipality.
Okay.
Gives to the task force, it's a kind of a bit of outsourcing or insourcing, and
okay.
It's not like, so yes, it is a municipality of Lezha, but I think we need to have external input. So it's a bit like it's not really in the municipality yet. I think it's more like a working group with external people, where the municipality is there, where the municipality is a kind of delegating to the task force the possibility of activating or of being active.
And the task force needs to be kind of a neutral actor too, and not too heavily involved in the city. Of course, the needs and wishes of the city need to be reflected, but
it's a bit maybe in this kick-starting thing. It's like in a new project, it would be like a consortium between the municipality with external part taking from experts and relevant organizations, no?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's like if you would apply for EU money, then I think it's municipality, but not only municipality with something like EXMI or Wonderland or whatever the call needs, so that they would be responsible to set up this first information point, for example, over a period of 3 years.
Okay.
The task force can be also something which we have in some Italian projects. So a person from an NGO or different NGOs coming together, putting resources together and having this one person or one office, one consortium who also is collaborating very closely with the city, but it's more a representative of the organizations who want to change something. It's not one single NGO, but a collaboration of different ones who represent different approaches and different benefits or needs.
In this, I think it's a matter of what the call is about, and that's, I think, to go back to the discussion before that we had, it's like you have two possible ways. You can, in a way, say, okay, let's focus and specialize, and let's go specific on one project, or let's think broader and let's go city scale. It depends. You can have task force city scale, but then focus down on the project, or you can have task force project based, but then can zoom out to the city scale. I think it depends. You cannot say what is right and what is wrong. It really depends also on the screening of the EU projects, and what can the funding be, how involved is the city going to be, and all this kind of things. But you have these two options in your hands, and there you have to. It's about of checking what the realistic possibilities are for this kind of issues to move ahead.